All right, so I got a comment this morning about growing up in a dysfunctional family, and I kind of outlined it into ChatGPT. But after I got that comment, I got that phone call that I mentioned while I was at the gym from this girl. And she just messaged me a few minutes ago and she said, I'm sorry for all the drama I caused in your life, but my family really screwed me up. And they taught me how to behave like a psycho. And this behavior isn't abnormal in a lot of girls. They grow up in families that are extremely dysfunctional with all kinds of traumatic events stemming from stepdads to stepbrothers to half siblings. They have a rough life. Comparatively to men, girls in dysfunctional homes have a lot more emotional baggage than most people, most men in the same situation. Because girls have a tendency to be more emotionally distraught. They, I think, at a higher rate, suffer from borderline personality disorder, which is one of the toughest mental disorders in that category to deal with. A lot of psychologists will not take on borderline patients because they don't get better, they get crazier, and they alienate themselves from everyone, family, friends, anyone that knows them. And so it becomes nearly impossible to be around them. And I've been around her for 5 years now, and she hasn't gotten any better. She's just gotten more open about when she's starting to experience those emotionally traumatic events. And usually it's triggered by her parents. That I don't know what it is. She just told me that her parents weaponized her against each other. And that's not a statement I want to hear at 8 o'clock in the morning. Anyhow, let's get into today's video. Growing up in a broken family isn't just hard, it's a training camp for a lifetime of dead end jobs. When you spend your childhood learning how to survive chaos instead of learning actual skills, you're already being groomed for the poverty grind. The yelling, the instability, the constant scrambling, it all prepares you perfectly for minimum wage work where nothing makes sense. You're expected to just deal with it. By the time you hit adulthood, you're not starting fresh. You're already burnt out and qualified for exploitation. Jesus. Now that was an introduction. I had no idea what was in there, but that was some of the best stuff that I've said on this channel since I started. Because most people that I come into contact with are broken in some way. You don't end up in Millennial Steam's world without having some sort of traumatic event or something bad happening to you in your life. You end up on this channel because you realize I'm stuck in the vicious cycle of minimum wage work, and I will be for the rest of my life. I've been there, people, myself, bouncing from one crap job to the next, to the next, to the next, and that's been my whole life. When you're a middle aged man and you're working at McDonald's right now, there's a lot of questions you stop and ask yourself, like, why did this have to happen to me? Why am I working here? Why do I make the wage of a person who dropped out of high school? Why do I have to do this job? And there's no rhyme or reason. You just weren't prepared for life like the people with stability in their homes. Two parents with good jobs, two parents who spoke the language, two parents who weren't going to Pound Town every day, two parents who didn't hate their jobs and realized that if they had children, they were just going to do the same thing to them. Good families usually raise better adapted children. When you grow up in chaos, like my friend did, where from day to day she didn't know what was going to happen to her, whether or not someone was going to try to take her, or stepdads, like I mentioned, are notorious for bad behavior. And unfortunately, for many people, there's just no way of dealing with that even once you become an adult. Going to a psychologist or a therapist or talking to someone isn't going to fix you. You're not going to be able to get out of a miserable job just because you go and you talk to someone. I love how our society touts mental health as being this incredible thing to fix everyone. There's no fixing the 99%. If you're screwed, If you're not rich right now and you're completely and totally screwed out there looking for work in a job economy that's toxic, every job interview you're going to go into is going to treat you like absolute garbage. And the only reason we stay at these jobs is for one reason: survival. This country thinks that just because you're surviving on a crummy job that you're okay. And that's her not. She won't leave me alone. And you get to the point where I have to work. I tell her this all the time. Either you're going to show up on time or I have to work and ignore you. And she doesn't get it. And it's becomes very, very difficult to deal with these people because when they need you emotionally, they will jump at you like a cat. But when they don't, when they're in that mood, that tone of voice, when you know they don't need you anymore, kind of like every manager at every evil corp in America. Once they don't need you anymore, you're gone. I've seen this at every single company I've ever worked at. Once they decide that they don't need you anymore, just like a relationship, just like a toxic relationship with a borderline adult, that's it. So let's get into our 3 talking points. These talking points are kind of long, so I'm not sure if I'm going to cut them in half or where I'm just going to stop talking. Growing up in a broken family isn't just an emotional burden. It's essentially an early internship into survival labor. When you're the kid left to figure out dinner because nobody came home, you learn problem solving under pressure. When you're managing your half siblings while your mom works or disappears, you're basically a low wage childcare worker with no paycheck. I will attest to that. Having had to raise 5 brothers and sisters because your parents aren't there, that was my job. I was the oldest. And for some reason, when you're the oldest, you qualify as non-paid childcare. I've changed a lot of diapers in my life, people. Fed a lot of babies. And there's either you or those children aren't going to make it because the neglect starts at birth. When your parents are psychos and your parents have nothing, they have no interest in the children that they create, those children are being set up to fail. And all across America, there are tens of millions of adults that got set up to fail. And there's nothing they could have done in order to improve their circumstances. Absolutely nothing to get out of the way. Your parents had no interest in devoting any time or resources into you. You showed up at school like I did. You ate through the school lunch program. And then you went back home to the toxic nature of your family. That's why yesterday's video, We're Family at Work, just extends the toxic nature of work in the workplace. Because it's just the same thing. You show up to a bunch of people that don't like you. You don't like your coworkers. They don't like you. You don't want to be there. They don't want to be there. It's exactly the household that I grew up. I didn't want to be there with those people that I didn't like. And it was obvious that they didn't like us as their kids. So it's just what we've created in our current American society is a dysfunctional hellhole for adults. If you're an adult like me, working a crap job at McDonald's, and you have been just skipping around your whole life, it's not by accident. They know that people like us grew up in environments that weren't suitable for human beings. And yet that conditioned us to accept the conditions in the workplace because they're a mirror image for poor people. Rich people, happy people don't work at the Death Star. They will not work in a warehouse. Just like on the road, Claire was talking about when she had to leave her Amazon warehouse. It was because it felt so toxic. It's mindless, it's brutal, and the worst part of it is you can keep working as hard as you can and you will never get ahead. And that was the title of one of my videos earlier this week. It's not designed for you to get ahead. Your family and your home life were never designed to help you. They were conditioning you to accept the reality of what your adult life was going to be like. Toxic relationships with the opposite sex, toxic relationships with your work. Everything about your life as a poor person sucks. And the worst part is you can't just turn that switch off. If you want to continue to live, this is the way you're going to have to live. And most of us don't want that. Talking point number 2. By the time children from chaotic families enter the workforce, they've already preloaded with burnout. They gravitate towards dead-end jobs not because they lack ambition, but because they've been conditioned to take whatever's available. Juggling 3 jobs at once, that feels like a natural extension of managing siblings, drama, and crisis at home. The corporate world thrives on this conditioning because broken family kids are less likely to demand fair pay or healthy boundaries. They've been trained to accept exploitation as a way of life, which is why so many end up stuck in survival mode, overworked, underpaid, and exhausted before 30. Does that remind you guys of anything? Does that remind you of Pound Town? Does that remind you of your work? Because it does. When I look back at all the places I've worked at since I was 16, that's a perfect description. Poor people don't fight back. If someone asked me how the revolution starts in this country for fair wages and better treatment of workers, it doesn't. All of us raised in these broken homes with parents who didn't give a crap. That's the America that they want. That's why these politicians are so eager for people to have more children. Because they need those broken people to fill these millions of jobs that don't pay anything. And the moment that those people feel like they're worth something, they remind you that you're worth less. Remember, essential and disposable simultaneously. What did the bug time teach us? That they didn't care about the proletariat. If you couldn't work remote, if you were a janitor like me, if you had to work, then it didn't matter. The bug time really showed Americans what they were worth. And if you were considered essential, you understood that it didn't matter if you made it to the end. Because just like fair wages, we're all in survival mode all the time. Remember, I'm a firm believer in the just-in-time paycheck or sometimes not-in-time paycheck where you run out of money. Like I asked one of my coworkers the other day, it was Monday and we just gotten paid Friday. And I asked him, it's like, hey, how much money do you have in your account right now? And he said $200. And I'm like, you just got paid Friday. It's Monday. And he just looked at me. It's like, I got to pay all my bills. The bills don't care how much money you make. Rent's going to be rent. Transportation is going to be transportation. And the skyrocketing cost of food is always going to be high. It's never coming down again, just like rent prices. The times in which we live require 100 hours of labor for low-level people to pay their rent every month. That's what I've told you guys last week. If you look at the calculation of how rent and the minimum wage fluctuate with one another, it's never designed that if you make more money, that you will be able to buy more things. They don't want you to be happy. They can't have the proletariat show up at work happy. The proletariat has to show up and take their soma so they can deal with the reality of things. In fact, I just read a comment about this guy that has been telling me about being unemployed now for months. And there's one thing that he said: there's always money for the thing that gets you messed up. Whether you're chewing it, drinking it, shooting it, whatever you're doing with it, as a poor person, you're always going to want to find relief. Why do you think we have these millions of homeless people out there taking stuff? You think you want to wake up in a sound mind, sober, when you're out there on the street figuring out how you're not going to bite it today? No. These people want to be somewhere else. These people are so far checked out of reality that they're actually free. They don't need to go to work. They don't punch a clock. They don't worry about things like college tuition or whether or not their kids are going to become doctors. They're not whole human beings anymore. And I would beg to say that the proletariat isn't a whole human being anymore either. We're shells of human beings. We don't vacation. We don't have leisure. All of our free time is spent figuring it out. Figure it out, millennials team. You make this little money and you have this many bills to pay every month. You better figure it out or else you're going to become homeless. And that's in the comment section. That's what everyone understands. We're all one paycheck away from homelessness. All right, let's get to our final talking point. Some manage to claw their way out by pursuing education or pivoting into fields like tech. But even then, financial stability isn't guaranteed. A college degree may provide a doorway, but it doesn't erase the early programming of scarcity and crisis. That's why many seek higher risk, higher reward alternatives like trading or entrepreneurship. For people raised in chaos, risk feels familiar. It mirrors the uncertainty of their upbringing. The gamble of leveraging trading or starting a business doesn't scare them. It feels like home. Escaping poverty isn't just about finding a better job. It's about unlearning the survival mentality instilled by a broken family and replacing it with strategy for actual growth. I would not agree with that statement. I think poor people just develop the mentality that they're just going to be poor. Because chances are, if you were poor, you know nothing about business. You know nothing about handling money. You don't know anything, and that's why you're wearing that blue uniform at Walmart. No Walmart employees sitting there thinking about how they're going to take off in their new business, whatever you're doing, whether you're sitting outside of a Taco Bell waiting for your next customer or you're scratching yourself while you're sitting at a desk talking to a microphone like I am. I'm not thinking about escaping. We're all thinking about what are you going to eat next? We're all thinking about, Pound Town opens at 8. I've got 2 days to pretend that I don't work at Pound Town, but McDonald's is waiting with my little goofy hat and my Happy Meal toy. It's waiting for you to come back. I'm surprised they give us any time off. But our time off is just spent doing other jobs. So it's not actually time off. It's just time that you're not at that particular farm today. You're just at another one today. That's life for us at the bottom. We never truly get to escape. We're all scared. If you had to look at the way that Americans are living right now, everyone who doesn't have money is scared about what's going to happen. The tariffs, these stupid government programs, all tariffs were a tax to us. We are paying the tariffs. You and me are paying the tariffs. Not some rich guy. Walmart's never going to pay for tariffs. This was always intended to fleece the general public. That's what tariffs are. Everything costs more because this government thought, oh, the proletariat's too stupid to understand what we're going to do to them. And we'll just do it under the guise of, oh, improving America, taking away your food stamps, taking away your Section 8 housing, no universal basic income, no universal health care. Does this sound like a progressive society to you? No. It sounds like a society where if you get sick as the proletariat, you're going in the box because you don't have health insurance. This country doesn't want you to have health insurance. And that's why Luigi's where he is right now. Because he decided that was all he could do to improve a society that doesn't want to be improved. This week when I was asking ChatGPT, how does the revolution start? And I said, well, we need an emblem. You know what the emblem of the revolution is? Luigi's face. All right, let's get into our closing monologue. Being raised in dysfunction means that the system has already written your resume before you ever walk into your first job interview. But here's the secret. Survival is a skill. If you can survive chaos, you can redirect that strength into something more than just wage slavery. Don't let broken families and broken systems trick you into thinking misery is your only option. Poverty may have trained you, but it doesn't have to own you. Isn't that sweet? Hope. ChatGPT always has hope at the end of every single video that I make. But you tell me, when you walk back into that crap job on Monday morning, do you really have hope? Because every time I ask this program, how do we fix this? It comes up with these stupid scenarios about communities coming together and people rising up together. Like I told you last week, poor people hate other poor people. We don't like seeing other poor people. In fact, this week I was at Kroger's and I noticed something that I never really thought about, is that poor people like to hide behind high brands, clothing brands. You may not have money, but as long as you're wearing a Tommy Hilfiger shirt, you don't have to feel poor. But the reality is that you are, and you are poor, and there's no escape from it.